learning. But if you like the class, and you want to pursue it, I would like everybody to order this beautiful small Pirkei Avot. It's from Koren Publishers. I'll send the link to Julie, but it's called the Neuwirth, Neuwirth, the Neuwirth, Neuwirth, the Neuwirth edition. So this is, you'll see it on Amazon. Oh, Marilyn, how'd you know? You just had it? Happen to have it? Oh, so Marilyn has it. This, you'll see it on Amazon. I do believe, if shipping is still happening in America. I don't know if you get things anymore in America, but this is a beautiful, succinct edition of Pirkei Avot. It's actually translated by Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Alav Shalom, may he rest in peace. And it is with commentary by Rabbi Mark Engel. It's an excellent, short, pithy, like it's not totally developed, but it's very, very solid. I didn't mean it's not totally developed. It's short. It doesn't go on and on and on with endless commentary, but it's powerful and succinct, and it's a beautiful book to own. And yeah, right, as Marilyn says, you can't go wrong with Rabbi Sachs. By the way, it is his yahrzeit. I think on Monday, a week from tonight, is his yahrzeit, so we can learn something in his memory. I believe it's on Monday, next Monday. And actually, when you live in Israel and you buy an Israeli calendar, you learn lots of things. Tonight is the yahrzeit of Yitzhak Rabin, who was assassinated. How many years ago? It must have been in 94 or 5.
Michael's bar mitzvah.
What?
Michael's bar mitzvah.
Oh, 95.
Right as my father-in-law was saying the prayer for peace in Israel.
Oh,
yeah, amazing. We found out later.
So when you have an Israeli calendar, you learn, oh, this is Yitzhak Rabin's yahrzeit. So and next week is Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs's first yahrzeit. So the Neuwirth edition, Koren, is the publisher. The Koren Pirkei Avot, Koren, and it's green and a hardcover. Okay, so I love Pirkei Avot. I've done it before. Some of you have learned it with me before. Some of you have learned it with other people before. Some of you have learned it with other people and me before. Some of you have learned it with me twice. Some people have learned it with me twice and other people twice. I mean, Lori's laughing, but it's, you could roll your eyes and say like seriously, like another Pirkei Avot? I'll try to explain why the answer is yes, another Pirkei Avot, because on the most simple level, it is the most accessible and non-halachic, meaning it's part of the Mishnah, and the Mishnah preceded the Talmud. So it's the part of our corpus called the Mishnah, which is not about laws of agriculture, laws of commerce, laws of marriage and divorce, all the agricultural laws in the Torah. It is the laws of ethics. And it's written in such a way that whether you're a scholar or a lay person, it's totally accessible. And I can tell you that, today we're doing a bit of an overview, and we're talking about some very critical, I think, very powerful points. But today there's a bit of history, because you have to understand the context in which you're learning. You have to understand what was going on at that time in Jewish history. But absolutely nothing has only historical relevance. Everything, the wisdom of Pirkei Avot, the times that they lived in, has unbelievable relevance for the times that we're in today. So every Mishnah, every Perek, every Pasuk, every verse that you're going to learn in the ethics of our fathers is incredibly relevant to your life. It could have been written yesterday. And that's why, so Laura, you were laughing, but it's kind of funny, because it's like, can't you teach something else? But I'm not teaching Pirkei Avot because I don't have anything else to teach. And that's not because I can't teach anything else. It's because I truly believe it's one of the most powerful ways to be connected Jewishly. And so we proceed again. It's never the same Every time it's different. So I think it's fair to say that every time it's like you're learning it anew, because you're always learning it in a different lens. So I want to sort of structure the class the same way we structured it before, which is I'm gonna talk for about 35 minutes, 30 minutes, and then 35, and then we're gonna open it up before 1. I would like there to be a good 15 minutes of discussion before 1 p.m. So instead of me talking and then anyone who has to go will go, I'm going to stop so that we can really discuss what we learned. So Julie, if you'll put the sheet on the share the screen. I'm going to talk about what Pirkei Avos actually is, where it is in the Jewish canon, when it was written, where it was written. But before we do that, I want to share with you something from the Talmud that speaks to me very much, and I think it might speak to you too. I think it's very powerful, and it really hammers, like it brings close to home how blessed we are to have the anchor of Pirkei Avot, which is really about how to be as good a person as possible, how to be as ethical a person as possible in a world where values are very relative and things are changing, and we live in a world of confusion. And an honest person can say, even though this seems right to me, I don't know if it's right. Is every human being stands at the time of history that they are in, and they think that the view of the world is right in the time that they stand. And yet, is there morality? Are there ethics that don't change? Are there ethics that transcend the passage of time and the passage of the vicissitudes of life and culture and the ups and downs and the world and the cultures that we find ourselves? Is there something that we can say, this is truth, this is transcendent, this is irrespective of where we live, when we live, and this is the genius of Pirkei Avot. But I want to start with a little piece from Pesachim, which is a tractate from the Talmud. Rabbi Yosef, who was the son, this is the second paragraph here, the son of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, became very ill. Some of you are going to know this. It was thought that his soul had visited the world to come in his near-death experience. When he revived, his father asked him what he had seen in the next world. Rabbi Yosef replied, "Father, I saw a topsy-turvy world. The high ones are low, and the low ones are high." And Rabbi Yehoshua responded, "My son, you saw things clearly." We live in a world where the great, the mighty, the sexy, the powerful, the rich are not necessarily the truly great ones. And we live in a world where the quiet, the humble, the poor, the meek, the disadvantaged might very, very well be the great ones. The barometer of a good life is not what's so often assessed in our culture as like the seeds of greatness. What truly is a good life is a person who is good, a person who is kind, a person who is giving, a person who is ethical, and a person who is constantly attuning themselves to what God wants from them at any given moment. And that's what Rabbi Yehoshua is saying. Rabbi Yehoshua is saying to his son, Rabbi Yosef, that when you almost died, you saw an upside down world. That's right side up. And the very nature of our world is topsy-turvy, where everything we think is so is not, and everything we think is not is so. And it takes death or the Messianic era or unbelievable clarity to understand the nature of the world, to cut through the confusion, to cut through the moral relativism, to cut through the fads of the times, and to see things clearly. And the piece in the Talmud goes on. Rabbi Yehoshua asked his son, where are the sages? Where are the rabbis in the world to come? And Rabbi Yosef replied, we are the same there as we are here. And if we had more time, I would open it up to the group. But I think in essence, what this sort of cryptic message is the nature of being a wise person in Judaism is that you see reality as it is. You see the world, you see through the lack of clarity, you see through the manipulativeness or the mask of our culture where everything is sort of confused, and you see things for how they are. So he says to his son, so Rabbi Yeshua says to Rabbi Yosef, we're the same there as we are here, because the nature of our great rabbis is that they were able to cut through the confusion. And that really is what we learn in Kohelet, from King Solomon, where he says, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, in the words of Kohelet. It's a very, very powerful book. But the things that we get caught up in, the stuff that we get all worked up about, very often it's not what we should get worked up about. And the things that we don't think are big deals are in fact very, very big deals. So sometimes, the world in the next, we live right now in a topsy-turvy world. The next world, which is called the Olam HaEmet, is called, or the world of truth, is right side up. But our sages, our rabbis, see reality for how it is. They cut through the confusion. And I that's why I keep going back to Pirkei Avot, even though I was so reluctant to teach it again, because it's like, come on, we've learned it so many times. Are they going to think that I just like don't want to do the work, so I'm using my old sheets, or like what? But the truth is, it is such a blessing to learn with a group of smart, caring, growth-oriented individuals pushing through for clarity. Every single one of these verses, and there are many, there are 6 chapters. There were 4, and then another one added, and then another one added ultimately. So there are very many. We probably won't do them all, but every one gives you clarity about this, about what's real in a world that by its very nature is topsy-turvy. So it's just like gold. And so living with Avot, which is, by the way, in Jewish culture, in Jewish practice, in Jewish time, we read a chapter a week for the 6 weeks, for the 7 weeks, and then we culminate in the end with from Passover to Shavuot. And one of the reasons we read a chapter of Pirkei Avot, one of the reasons is because Shabbat is really, really long, and you have a lot of time on your hands. But more deeply, the reason you learn Pirkei Avot, one of the reasons, from Passover to Shavuot, which we've talked about many times, is actually one holiday because they're bookends. We've talked about that so many times. Passover is freedom from physical slavery. We've talked about that a million times. We were freed from physical bondage. And yet, without a raison d'etre for our physical freedom just winds up being another form of servitude. We get enslaved by our desires and our agendas and our wants and addictions or whatever it is. Freedom from physical slavery isn't enough, which is why the Shavuot, which represents getting God's wisdom in the Torah and becoming servants to Hashem, is the raison d'etre for the physical freedom in the first place. So we read Pirkei Avot because we are getting freer and freer and freer until the culmination of Shavuot, when we recognize we were freed from, so that we could yearn for a relationship with you, God, and develop it through developing ourselves, through developing our goodness and our kindness, our deliberation, our patience, our inner strength, all the things that we're going to work on throughout Pirkei Avot. So that's why we read it from the holiday that marks physical freedom up to the holiday that represents the reason for physical freedom, which is receiving the Torah on Shavuot. So that's why I keep going back and back and back. But what we're going to see today, so just very quickly, it's super important. It's incredibly important to understand what time in Jewish history this was redacted. So redacted, I don't even know if that's a verb, redaction, redacted, to redact. So the redaction or the editing or pulling together of hundreds and hundreds of years of rabbinical wisdom. So what you have in Pirkei Avot is a compendium, basically, of 500 years of rabbinical wisdom. But it's incredibly important to understand what was going on at that time. Of course, it was 500 years of incredibly turbulent Jewish history. It was unbelievably turbulent. A ton was going on. We need to understand what was actually happening and what is so unbelievable about Pirkei Avot. But just to understand on one foot that Pirkei Avot is a chapter nestled in the middle of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is a concise composition from the rabbis of all of Jewish law, received from Sinai and an unbroken transmission from the beginning, from Sinai, and through each generation until it got to a point where, because of persecution and because of the diaspora of Jews being literally flung out to all corners of the world and the intensity of the instability, it was no longer orally transmitted, it was written down. And it was by Judah the Prince, by the Yehuda Hanasi, in the in the beginning of, I think, the 3rd century of the Common Era. So you basically have 200 years or 300 years before the Common Era, culminating in 200 years after the Common Era, roughly 500 years, where the Mishnah was orally passed down and then ultimately codified in the beginning of the 3rd century, I think, by Rabbi Judah the Prince. The Mishnah is divided into 6 main volumes. They're all about Jewish law, the holidays, temple service, civil law, marriage, divorce, etc. But then finally, ultimately, it was written down. It was never meant to be written down, but at a certain point, it had to be written down. And it was codified in the beginning of the 3rd century. What was happening then? The temple had been destroyed, and the Jews were basically being kicked out of Israel, but and they were beginning to basically form the next large Jewish community in Babylon. But this work is written in the land of Israel. Upon completion, that's basically when Jews were totally kicked out, and then the kind of the center of Jewish life shifts to Babylonia, where the Talmud ultimately, a few hundred years later, is going to be composed. So that's just a little, it just in a nutshell. But what's most important to understand here is that it is the only book in the Mishnah that's devoted to ethics. It is the wisdom of the sages. And really, going back to that first piece in Tractate Pesachim, it's really about how to focus on ultimate reality, what it's really about, how to cut through the illusion, how to not get tripped up in all the illusions of our times and not just fall for whatever we're hearing, but be able to say what ethics, what values, what morality transcends culture, transcends time. That is where I want to cleave. That's because the world is upside down. But when I die, I will see a right side up world. And where will I stand in that right side up world? If I am trying to be better, to be more giving, to be more caring, to be more attentive, to yearn to find God in this world and understand what he wants from me and form a relationship with him through good deeds, through Torah, through prayer, then this world, when it becomes right side up, I can hold my head high. I can enter it. Part of the spiritual malaise of our time is somehow the soul knows that the world is upside down and we don't know how to right side up it, so to speak. So that's what Pirkei Avot is. It is every single Mishnah, everything we're going to learn gets to the heart of what it means to be ethical empirically, meaning ethical not relatively. We live in a world of value relativism. Yep, this works for this one, this works for that one. You know, for this one, this makes sense. For that one, this makes sense. But what makes sense? And of course, that's why, Julie, if you just go to the top for a minute, that's why we're going to focus on this more next week, but that's why it starts with something absolutely nonsensical, but also unbelievably powerful. That's why it starts from the beginning. Not really the beginning. It starts with Moses, who received the Torah. It goes even farther back, of course, to Abraham. But that's why it starts with this, because it's very important to understand that not only are laws, Shabbat, kosher, tzedakah, mezuzah, Shemitah, which is the agricultural laws in the land of Israel, not only those are from Sinai, but also the law, the ethics that we're going to learn, those are also from Sinai. So you're going to read things that you're going to say, like, for example, you know, Havedanas kol ha'adam b'chav zchut, that you should give everybody the benefit of the doubt, or you should be the first person to smile in the marketplace. And you can say, well, you know, those are nice ideas. Actually, they're not just nice. Just like Shabbat is rooted in Sinai, smiling at everyone you meet is rooted in Sinai. These are empirical ethics. These are the ethics that these are reality ethics. So we cleave to them. In a very stormy world, we cleave to these ethics, which is very powerful, because when we do them naturally, we can see that they're not just natural behaviors, they're actually ways of serving and connecting to our Creator. That's really why the Pirkei Avot starts with Moses received the Torah from Sinai and transmitted it to Yehoshua. Yeshua transmitted it to the elders to the prophets transmitted to the men of the Great Assembly. The men of the Great Assembly said three things, and then we go right into the points that we're going to talk about next week. Being deliberate in judgment, fascinating. Raising many students, fascinating. Making a protective fence for the Torah. These are all things that we're going to learn. But the point number one about this is don't think that just the laws come from Sinai. The ethics come from Sinai. You know, someone said to me, like, oh, it was a rabbi on Shabbat. He said, you know, everyone shakes hands, pretend it's not COVID. Like, remember the days before COVID? Everybody shakes hands. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. Good to see you. Very nice. But once upon a time, there was someone who shook a hand for the first time in the world, meaning no one had ever shaken a hand before. So we just shake hands reflexively pre-COVID, right? Now it seems so funny, shake hands, you know, but once upon a time, someone said, I like this person. I want to connect to this person. I'm going to physically reach out to them with my hand. It's really the truth for Jewish values and ethics too. They seem so regular. They're like regular, be deliberate in judgment. Who shouldn't be deliberate in judgment? But once upon a time, someone shook a hand for the first time, meaning these were not normal ethics. This was not normative morality. Judaism introduced a morality that we take for granted now. Just like everyone shakes a hand. Well, someone did it once upon a time for the first time. So too, these values and ethics that we think are like, whatever. I mean, they were created, and Judaism brought them to the world. So that's one reason why it says Moses received the Torah and transmitted it to Joshua. But this verse is crazy. Do you know how much happened between Moses getting the Torah and giving it to Yoshua? Yoshua was, of course, the next disciple of Moses who brought the Jews into the land of Israel. And then Joshua, along with the elders, conquered and divided the land of Israel according to the tribes. And then there was an enormous period of prophecy. And the prophets transmitted it to the Anshe Knesset HaGadola, which are our sages of Pirkei Avot. That is so much time, and so much happened in that little like blurb. It's almost like a ridiculous thing to say. So I copied, like, what does it mean? It's like saying, I mean, it's like if you were at your mother's birthday party and you said, you made a toast to your mother and you said, you were born, you got married, you went into a nursing home. But I have so much more. There's so much more. So there's so much. Why this? One reason is to say, just as our laws come from Sinai, our ethics come from Sinai, but there's something else. There's something else. And I'm going to say it in a nutshell, and then we're going to read a whole piece that I actually copied from Rabbi David Rosenfeld, who writes a piece on Pirkei Avot that's quite good. So there was a great pivot in Jewish history. There was, it's kind of like, I remember like Sheryl Sandberg, like I'm not comparing the Torah and Sheryl Sandberg, but I remember the Sheryl Sandberg's book where she basically said, like, I had, my plan A, which was, like my life, it was going to look like this, and we were going to have this, and we were going to retire at this age, and we were going to go, we're going to take this vacation, and we were going to, like, I was going to retire from Facebook then, and then we were going to go, right? And then her husband died on a bicycle, had a heart attack, and died at a crazy young age, I don't know, early 50s or something like that. And the whole book is about plan B. Like, when plan A isn't, what does it mean to live with plan B? Like, what does it mean to, like, well, she says, like, kick the, out of plan B, but what does it mean to not only make do with plan B, but to understand Judaically, going deeper than Sheryl Sandberg's book, I think, even though that book was so good, which is if plan A isn't, then I got to just totally make friends with plan B, which was her premise. But from a Jewish perspective, if plan A isn't, and it's plan B, then plan B is exactly what exactly what the Jewish people, or exactly what the world needs to fulfill its purpose. I need plan B. If I didn't, if my soul, if the Jewish people, if the world didn't need plan B, then plan B wouldn't have happened. I need plan B. It's not just like I've got to accept it and embrace it and make friends with it. It's exactly what I need. So Judaism, it's like kind of like when COVID hit, and there were companies that were able to pivot and companies that weren't able to pivot. The ability to pivot, but from a Judaic perspective, it's more than pivot. It's pivoting and understanding that the thing you're pivoting toward is exactly what you need to fulfill your purpose, or else it wouldn't be. And that's what the Jewish people, or the rabbis, the sages of Pirkei Avot, of the Mishnah, they pivoted. They made a massive pivot. And I'm going to explain it in a few words, and then we're going to read our piece. And I want to stop in 10 minutes. So I'm going to say this fairly quickly because I want to open it up. But this concept of pivoting, but pivoting with faith, understanding that what you think you need and what you need are not the same thing. And so this, by the way, everything starts with our Bible, which we're reading now. And it's so incredible to read about Abraham. Abraham is the beginning of it all. And in a nutshell, there were other people who believed in one God. You know, people say he was the first monotheist. Wrong. There was starting with Adam, and there was Methuselah, there was Hanoch. There were other monotheists. But what Abraham and Sarah, what they brought to the world, it's not just a God up there in the sky, like some extremely powerful being, but it's my God. It's a God that's intimately involved in my life, that I live my life in the image of God, that I live in the Derech Hashem, which means just as God is a giver, I'm also a giver. Just as God is a protector, I also seek to protect. Just like God is constantly pouring goodness into the world without getting thanked, I too can give without compensation. Just like God is compassionate, I can be compassionate. Abraham was not the first monotheist, but what he was the first person to take the idea of God as the primal cause, meaning there's one thing that did not need to be caused by anything before it to come into being, and that's what I'm going to worship. But it wasn't just intellectual for him. It was, and this is my God. I will seek to come close to him through my right action. And that's what was different with Abraham. It starts with the Bible and it moves on to the prophets. But the pivot that I want to discuss very briefly is, it might not seem like a really big deal. It was a very, very big deal in Judaism. Jewish history is 4,000 years old. For many thousands of years, really let's say for the first 2,000 years, Judaism, what we were like nursing babies. What does that mean? We were like nursing babies. All a baby has to do is open their mouth and suck and get their nutrients. And the nature of Judaism, both biblical and after the biblical era, the era of prophecy, it was passive. You did what you were told in the temple, and God's Shekhinah, God's presence came down. You knew exactly if something was right or wrong because the prophet would tell you. God was invisible, of course, but absolutely palpable. You knew if something was right or something was wrong. The Shekhinah did not dwell in the temple. The divine presence didn't dwell if the Jewish people weren't worthy. There was a direct transmission from God that allowed a certain passivity from the Jewish people. Prophecy was high and spiritual. A prophet would tell you what you needed to do. Prophets actually told you what your unique purpose was. Prophets would tell you what was right. Prophets would tell you what was wrong. But that also, that the era of prophecy, we were passive. We went to the temple and we did what we were supposed to do, and we got the godly result. We were like children. It was a passive era. So when prophecy ends in the middle, toward the end of the destruction of the Second Temple, and the Jews are basically, I'm simplifying, but the Jews are basically sent into exile, all of a sudden, everything's gone. Prophecy is gone. No more prophecy. The temple has been destroyed. No more temple. No more place where we come and God tells us, and God's divine presence informs us if we're on track, if we're not on track. We are bereft. And by the way, this was at the same time in Jewish history when we lost 10 of the 12 tribes. They were, vaporized into history, and there was terrible, terrible persecution. And there was an incredible sense of, probably like the Holocaust, did you leave me? Did you leave me? How are we supposed to exist? Judaism was always about an invisible but present God, an invisible but very much a God very obviously, palpably involved in our lives. That we felt, we knew God's presence, and and prophets directly told us the will of God. So you get prophecy is gone, and then the destruction of the second temple, and being sent out of Israel into exile for the next 2,000 years. There was a feeling of, I mean, it is not at all like COVID, but it kind of reminds me on like a bazillion times more, the sense of like, what now? Like, what's the next step? It was, the Jewish world was bereft. There was a sense of, I'm saying it very simply, yet this was the real deal. You can't be Jewish without the temple. You can't be Jewish without prophecy. The great pivot of the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, the sages, the men of the Great Assembly, which is, if plan A isn't, plan B is what we need. What we need, it's exactly what the Jewish world needs to move into the next stage of its destiny. Jewish people have a destiny. History has a beginning and an end. History is not linear and purposeless. History is cyclical and ultimately purposeful. So in order to move into the next stage of Jewish history, we need to stop being babies. There's a passivity to a prophet telling you exactly what you need to do. And so the men of the Great Assembly did something absolutely remarkable, which is they responded to modernity. They responded to the necessity of our contemporary time. This is so important. Even in our world today, there's two responses to modernity, and neither of them are healthy. One response to modern times is, oh, Judaism is archaic. It's not really relevant. We'll take what we like. We'll disregard the rest. It's misogynistic. It's old-fashioned. It doesn't make sense. We are more enlightened now, and we don't need it. That's one negative response to modernity. But another negative response to modernity is, we can't, and I see this in Israel a lot. You see this in Israel a lot. Don't change anything. You see this, like, I'm not being disparaging of these communities, but when you know, 2 Shabbases ago, we lived 5.5 miles from the old city. So we drove to the old, we took a taxi, and then before Shabbat, and then we walked home. We walked 5.5 miles home, and you walk, the whole beginning of the walk from the old city is through Musrara, through our Jaffa Gate, through Musrara, and then through Mea Sharim, basically. So the ethos of that community is, don't change anything. Take what we were in Europe and cut it and paste it to our modern lives. Any movement away from what was is a diluting, is a dereliction. It's like it's a negative. Keep everything. And then there is a third response. And when I think of people like Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, or I think of the sages of Pirkei Avot, I think of certain leaders, I think of all of us, I think of something of, this is very, very important. It's not, we know better, we don't need the old anymore. It's also not, I don't think it is, don't change anything. Change is dangerous. It's something different. Take what we have, take the eternal, take the permanent, but don't be static. Move forward with the permanent. In other words, to be, I think I wrote on the top, to be traditional, yet innovative. To take what was recognizing that it too is from Sinai, and yet to be flexible and move with it as an eternal wisdom. Meaning, I can't say it's no longer relevant, but I can apply it to the times that we live in. And that's what the rabbis did. They took a religion that was about the temple, it was about prophecy. Jews were actually very unlearned to a large degree, because you really didn't have to be so learned. It was very, very passive. You did the right thing in the temple and you got the right results. It was an immature, to a certain degree, it was an immature Judaism where God was more imminent, he was more present, but he wasn't asking as much from us. When the temple was destroyed and the second temple was destroyed and there was no more temple, and when we were exiled from Israel, and when we no longer had prophets telling us what was yea, what was nay, what was right, what was wrong, the sages said, we've got to pivot. We got to kick the you know what out of plan B. There is a plan B. And how do I know that it's how the Jews need to mature as a people? I know it because we're in it. And so they embraced what's called rabbinic Judaism. So we moved, Julie, if you move it down to, we don't have time to read the piece. You can read it on your own. But the great pivot was God, go down a little bit more, is that, God's guiding hand, this is like in the kind of middle, the fourth paragraph, God's guiding hand was no longer revealed to Israel as it had once been. So we didn't have the big miracles and the big lights. And so the sages recognized a new age is dawning. It's the age of using our minds. It's the age of growing up. We don't have prophets anymore. We have to seek out God ourselves. What is our tool for connection? The Torah. And and applying the Torah, learning the Torah. And that's what's going to sustain us through what was going to be generation after generation of exile and persecution, culminating in Holocaust and such incredible, difficult things. But to deliberately study, learn, and apply an eternal, permanent document in a non-fixed way. It's being flexible and immovable. Judaism is about being immovable in a flexible way. It is a very, very powerful thing. Our sages saved Judaism. When the temple was destroyed and there was no more prophecy and 10 tribes had been lost and there was endless instability and persecution, Jews felt God had annulled the covenant. It was probably like 1945. It was a time of tremendous low. And yet the sages, in their understanding that if plan B is here, then it's exactly what we need. The sages said, we are no longer in a more infantile era. We're now in a more mature era where God is less there, but that means that we are more responsible. And I'm going to end with this point. This point is a Kabbalistic idea. You've learned it many, many times, of tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is divine contraction. It's just like a woman whose womb, whose body contracts, her uterus contracts to make room for other, right? There's actually a contraction of the uterus to make room for other. So God is infinite. God is everything. You can't have God and people. Like, you can't have infinite and us. How do you have infinite and us? Like, how do we not know God is here? Well, God is mitzamtzem himself. He contracts and constricts himself, almost like a uterus, in order to allow us to have existence and a certain illusion of independence, so we can choose him. And that is the era that we find Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot is the end of prophecy. It's the beginning of rabbinical Judaism, where the laws of Torah learning and saying blessings, and all the sitter that so many of you have, all the fixed prayers were fixed. The Siddur was fixed by the men of the Great Assembly. All these things came out of Plan B. This was the great pivot from a more infantile stage where God was more there and therefore less constricted, and therefore we were less responsible, to an era where he was more hidden, and therefore we had to step up our game. And I think I'm just going to end by saying we're very much in that stage now, that the more God is hidden, the more invitation we have to be partners in fixing the world. The more God's presence was dominant, of course, the splitting of the sea and the Bible, but also in the thousands of years of prophecy that ended 2,000 years ago, or a little bit more, that we didn't have to grow up. The less available, totally available, but the less obvious, the more constricted, the greater the invitation for us to be partners in our own perfection and the world's perfection. And that's amazing. That is an amazing thing. And I'm just going to throw in that I think in the land of Israel, you really, really see it. You really see that God is totally hidden, but actually not so. And I'll just give you one example and then I'll stop. I'm in an Ulpan 5 days a week, 4.5 hours a day. Here's who's in my Ulpan. I have people from Venezuela, Mexico, Argentina, France, Russia, Japan, Australia, Ukraine. I'm missing so many. Other ones, Budapest. There's so many places. This is literally prophesized that the Jewish people are all going to come home. And even in my little room in downtown Jerusalem, I'm seeing it with my own eyes of the Jewish people coming home. And just like 2,000 years ago, the Jewish world, as they got kicked out of Israel, the Jewish world got founded in Babylon, and the Talmud came out of that. Now we're in a different era where the Jewish future is moving toward Israel, and sort of like the gravity is moving toward the land of Israel. And you can, if you sensitize your eyes, you can very much see it. But the principle remains the same. The sages pivoted, and they understood that a God who was less obviously available was not a sign of rejection and was not cause for despair. It was actually an invitation to be a more active partner in your own personal shlemut, completion, and in the completion of the world itself, in tikkun olam. So keep that in mind, that the great pivot, as we go through Pirkei Avot, it's not just wise, pithy statements. They are statements that teach us what it means to play a leading role in the perfection of the world. In an era where God is hidden, to the degree he's hidden is the degree of the invitation for our partnership. And that's how we kick the you know what out of Plan B. I mean, that is really what it's all about. So, okay, of course I went over, but we have 6 minutes for comments, and then I'm happy to stay on. So please, anybody share thoughts, questions, anything at all.
Can I quickly do announcements? Thank you, Ellie, for a great class, and I'm going to make this really quick.
Can I just ask, the handout, was that sent somewhere?
It was sent.
Because
It was sent to. Okay, it was sent via email, Carolyn. If you were on and you used to get them before, I will add you. Make sure to add you.
Well, Carolyn should be on there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marilyn. It's wonderful to see you again.
So I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you, Carolyn, and I'll make sure you're on the list. Okay.
Thanks.
You're
Thank
very
you.
welcome. Okay, so I just wanted to make a couple of quick announcements. One is all of our classes, our robust classes are all live and live via Zoom or live at the center starting this week. I'm not going to go through the whole list. Everybody's received it via email. If you have any questions, of course, please ask me. You also can always reach out to me to get recordings of classes that you can't make it to. We're going to try to record all of our classes on some level to send out to people. And yesterday we sent out a very special email that was also shown in today's email about fundraiser for the IDF for Libby Began's brigade. They're being, I don't know what the word is, but sent to the Gaza border and for the whole winter, and they just don't have enough warm clothes. So the L'Chaim Center is rising up, and this is an amazing opportunity, and that you can, every dollar that you give, will go directly to these IDF soldiers. So there's no middleman, there's no anything, but as a community, we are going to try to raise $4,500 by next Monday, and we're a little more than halfway there already, to get them each a jacket and a sweater to keep them warm through the winter. So that's in your email, check on that. We've had lots of people, and thank you very much for the donations. If we raise even more, then we can give it to other brigades, the money, or to more money for them if they need anything else. So that'll kind of be up to Rabbi David and Allie how to spend any extra money on them. And then the other thing is that we're just asking for payment now for our classes. As you know, for 18 months, we did not accept any payment. We just started payment again this month after the holidays. We started with $18 a class, and it'll always be a drop-in for $18 a class whenever you want to just drop in. But starting November 1st, we will get information out around that time. We are offering a couple of other different ways to pay, so you could go to multiple classes a week if you'd like, and it doesn't break the bank, because our goal is not to make money, but it's to learn and learn with you guys as much as you want to learn. We want to be here for you to learn. So we have a $90 a month program where it's unlimited classes, all of the classes, including recordings of the classes if that's what you'd like, if you can't make it, though it's always nice to be here live or live via Zoom. Or if you want to choose just one class, say you just want to be in to Allie's class each week, then you could do a $250 per semester. It's still less on your wallet than paying $18 each time. So we'll have information on how to sign up for that as we get closer to November 1st. We just have to do some programming on the back end. And lots more going on. Just keep an eye out for not all the emails, but scroll down the email when you get it, because we have lots.
And come to Israel in May. We're going to have the most amazing trip. Amazing trip. May 8th.
I'm done.
Tell us.
Can you tell those of us who don't know what the trip in May is about briefly?
Oh, the trip in May is an incredible opportunity. Is that Marcy and Stacy together? That's so cute. Hi, girls. It is with me and David and our dear friend Avi Schwartz. And it's Israel from the inside, doing wonderful, meeting incredible people, hearing incredible stories, going to beautiful places, not your typical tourist, sites. Really Israel from the inside. We change it up every year. So for people who've done our trip before, it's never the same. We already have like a beginning itinerary. The first night is in Akotico, which is this fabulous, unbelievable, ancient Ottoman hotel in Akko, where every room is, it's just a remarkable place. And I believe it's 10 days. However, that being said, we're really encouraging people to either tack on time in the beginning, before, or even better, when you're not jet lagged, afterwards, to spend time with us and stay with us. And if there's too many people, we'll figure it out. There's their bed and breakfast right by my house. So really hoping that anyone who wants to tack on a Shabbat or more, we are excited. What are the dates? Couples. So you can be a couple, you can be a single, you can, and everybody is welcome. And the day, it's May 8th. I want to say something like May 18th or so. I think it's 10 days, but definitely should tack on a few days. Ideally at the end, so that you are not jet lagged and you can really just, you know, and you've been through the inspiration of the trip, and then we can sort of just process it with lots of Jerusalem nights and wine and fun. So we'll have a great, I mean, it's going to be so, I wish it, I don't want to move time, but I can't wait. I can't wait. I'm here to nudge every single one of you in this Zoom room to think about it. You got, it's for people like you. It's for people who are like already learn, like interested, connected. It's for this crowd. It's for this crowd. It's for this mishpacha. Very much. Yeah, can't say enough about it. Okay, does anybody, oh, I like the heart. Does anybody have anything they want to share or ask or insights at all? Keeping in mind that next week we're in honor of Rabbi Sachs's yard site, and we could talk a little bit about him. We're going to get right into some of the ethical teachings that we talked about in the first Mishnah. We're going to get right into it. This was just a bit of a historical overview, but more than history, it was really about what it means to be unmoving and flexible, traditional and innovative, and how that sums up Jewish life. And also the as God pulls back his imminent presence, so too in tandem is the opportunity we have to be partners.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question, Liz. Who gets to decide how
Liz.
things are changing? I mean, your idea of what is pivoting to keep up with the times may be different than my idea, you know, or the ultra orthodox. Like who gets to decide, and where's that line?
Well, that's really the reason for the first Mishnah. The first Mishnah is Moses received the Torah from Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua. And then it goes on until the sages of Pirkei Avot, as if to say, these are the immutable, transcendent ethics, empirical ethics of Sinai. And our role is not to change them, but to take what is eternal and apply them. So, for example, I mean, we do this all the time. Judaism does this all the time. But specifically in the era of the rabbis, Judaism moved from a religion of prophecy to a religion of Torah learning, maintaining Jewish continuity through prayer and Torah learning, and not through the temple, not through the obvious. And so the answer to your question, Liz, is they didn't decide that. They took the eternal the eternal Torah that they had, that Moses received on Sinai, and they didn't change it, but they applied it to a new reality that was beyond their control. And I think that's really the answer. And I mean, as we go through Pirkei Avot, we can ask ourselves sometimes, like, how does this rub with modern values? Like, how does this, does it resonate? Does it not resonate? What's the tension with what I believe to be justice today? I mean, Liz, we've talked about this before, which is like, I'm at odds with some of this empirical, like non-subjective morality. I'm not totally jiving with it. So where does that leave me? So that is the tension that we face in modernity, knowing that both roads, either or are the wrong roads. Either I drop it all because it's not relevant anymore, I know better, and nothing can ever change ever. Like that's, so we know there is something else, and that's really, but we'll grapple with the ethics, Liz. We'll say, you know, you can say, boy, I'm not sure about this. And that's the tension that creates growth and curiosity and connection with all of us. I think that's really.
Love it. Thank you.
Hi,
Isn't,
Susie.
I just have a comment.
Carolyn,
Isn't,
yeah.
that's
Carolyn.
also, isn't that the challenge of Judaism? This is a binary world and we're supposed to make everything come together. So thanks for that. Seeing it as an opposite of immovable and flexible. And if you're able to do that, there's growth. So you're closer to God. Did I get it right?
Wait, say it one more time, Carolyn.
I said in this world, we have a binary world. Everything seems opposite, but actually it's not. In a higher realm, it goes to one, and that's our challenge, to bring
Right.
that one down to this binary
Beautiful.
world. And
Very
then,
beautiful.
right, and then we become godly or closer to God. So that
That's
time
right.
period is what you said, we grew up a little, and we're challenged
That's right.
to find a higher level than where we started. Did I get it right?
You definitely got it right. And by the way, we're reading, that's beautiful, Carolyn, and we're reading about that in the Torah. I mean, that is literally who Abraham was. Abraham wasn't the first discoverer of the one God. There were about 10 before him. Noah, there was Noah. They knew, but like you said, we live in a fractious, binary, topsy-turvy world. And what Abraham did was he discovered and understood that a one God, a unified God, needs to be brought down into a binary fractured world. And we can unify the fractured, unify I'll just give an example. Money can create incredible division. Don't forget that when God pulls away and we're given more choice, we can heal the world with that choice. We can destroy the world with that choice. We can destroy it. But Abraham was the first person to understand one God isn't just up in the sky and the world's all filled with evil. The world is filled with fractiousness and binariness and evilness as an invitation for me to unify it, to bring the one God into this world. So I didn't even have to elaborate. What you said was really beautiful and true. So you take money can lead to division, jealousy, materialism, divorcing from God, separating from God. What do I need God? I've got a yacht and I've got this, So it can lead to that, or it can lead to money. If I'm given this, it's a gift. How am I meant to use it? And spiritualizing the physical money and unifying the physical money with the spiritual God, creating unity in the world. And that's what, you're right, just like you said, that's what it means to be, that's what Judaism is. Susie, were you going to say something? Did you leave? What? You're still muted. You're muted.
I just wanted to share quickly. I found this book, a small volume of Pirkei Avot, chapters of the fathers. I believe it was my grandparents. It was published in Jerusalem by Feldheim. I'm not sure the year, but it's the translation and commentary by Rabbi Hirsch of Pirkei Avot. So I thought it was I haven't had time to look through it and read it, but I'm gonna try to follow through with it with what we're doing and maybe add some of the things that he had to say because he's such a genius.
Oh, I wish I could. You know what, Susie, send me, maybe I can find that there's so many like used bookstores in Jerusalem.
The place to find it.
I love it.
Yeah, I'll look for I'll send you the information. I mean,
would be
the publisher and the copyright and all that.
Yeah, I mean, Rav Hirsch, he symbolizes so much of what we were talking about. Rav Hirsch lived in Germany at the time of the Enlightenment, where Jews were saw Judaism as archaic and old, as an impediment to advancement, and it was like post-French Revolution, and it was time to be German, and Berlin is our Jerusalem, and let's let go of all the archaic nonsense that keeps us in the Middle Ages. And Rav Hirsch came and said, you can be modern, you can be in the university, you can be cultured, and you can hold on to the eternal and the permanent. Oh, that,
So anyway, I'll send you the
Oh.
information. I gotta run, but it was a great class.
Can I,
Thank you.
can I
Thank
just
you.
hold it up for a second more?
yeah,
Okay, chapters of the
which is
Father.
Pirkei Avot in English.
Okay.
Yeah,
Uh-huh. Great, that looks great.
okay. Be well.
Bye, Susie.
Bye.
Anybody else?
Julie seems happy. You know.
Mhm. Ally, I just have a personal question. Do you still have your own, like, how does someone communicate with you now? I mean, is it through the Crime Center? Do you have your own email? Do you have,
You rub 3
You
stones
own a cell
together.
phone?
And go, woo, woo, woo.
like, you must
No.
have a different number in Israel phone, or, I mean.
Donna, do you use WhatsApp at all?
Yes,
Oh, then just call me right now. I mean, I use my American number.
oh, you do? Oh, perfect.
All you
I can
do is,
that.
I think you do +1 847.
Yeah,
Oh,
no, I
if
have your
we talked
number.
before- Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, is it your
Yeah.
same number? Okay.
Yeah.
I just wondered.
No, you don't do +1. That's for a call. No, for WhatsApp, you just do, you're
Yeah,
right.
can
You
you
don't
put in your
do
number and a
+1.
contact, a name or something? Yeah.
It's like you're calling your neighbor.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know.
But
if
you have
have
to
it-
do it on WhatsApp.
Okay, thanks. Will do.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
And then your email, Ally, too, because you don't use the L'chaim Center email anymore.
Just alliebegan@gmail.com.
Thank you.
Yeah, WhatsApp. Get WhatsApp.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
How do you reach you? It's so easy. It's so funny, Donna. It's like, it's so easy. And wait, is Stephen here? Did you leave, Stephen? I think he left. Oh, he wanted a video tour of my, of our area.
Thank you,
Oh, Robin,
Ally.
you're welcome,
Thank
guys.
you.
It is so nice to be with everybody. All right, we'll end now so that we don't, because if we
Thanks,
want to stick
Ally.
from 12, we want to stick from noon to 1.
What time is it there?
Well, it's what, oh, here it's 9:15, but that's fine. It's just, I want to respect people's time.
Yes.
Okay, have
It
a
was
great.
great having you back,
One hour.
Ally.
The
Say
lunch
hi
break.
to everybody. Say hi to the Margolises.
I will. Come visit and come in May.